The more people who see it, the less likely anyone is to do anything. That is not a theory. That is what the data shows. Across dozens of experiments, in different countries, with different populations, the result is the same every time. And you have done this. Not once, many times. In situations where someone needed something and you were not alone, so you waited. You assumed someone else would handle it. You told yourself you were not the right person, or that you did not have enough information, or that someone better positioned was probably already on it. And nothing happened. Not because you were the wrong kind of person, because you were in the wrong kind of conditions. You were not indifferent. You were not cruel. You were not a bad person in that moment. You were responding exactly the way the situation was designed to make most people respond. The design was not intentional. Nobody engineered it. But it is consistent, and it is documented, and it applies to almost everyone who has ever found themselves in a group when something needed doing. But nobody moved. 38 people, each one presumably decent, each one presumably capable, and the outcome was nothing. There is a name for what happened in those moments. And once you have it, you will start noticing it everywhere. In rooms you sit in conversations you have, in the quiet of a group that should have spoken and did not, in the scroll past something that deserved a response, in the meeting where everyone waited for someone else to go first. March 13th, 1964, 3:15 in the morning, Kew Gardens, Queens, New York. A 28-year-old woman named Kitty Genovese was returning home from work. She managed a bar in Midtown Manhattan. She parked her car in the lot adjacent to her apartment building. She was walking the short distance to her front door. She was attacked before she reached it. The attack lasted over 30 minutes, not in one continuous episode. It happened in 3 separate intervals, with pauses in between where her attacker left the scene, and then came back. During those 30 minutes, at least 38 of her neighbors witnessed some part of what was happening. This is the number that was originally reported. Lights came on in apartment windows. Someone shouted from above. The attacker looked up, looked around, and briefly left. Then he returned. One call was made to the police, after she was already dead. One call, from 38 people, over 30 minutes. The silence in between is the part that takes the longest to explain. The story reached the front page of the New York Times 2 weeks later. It stayed in the national conversation for months. Psychologists, journalists, and politicians all asked the same question. How does this happen? The first answer people reached for was character. New Yorkers were cold. Dense urban living had worn away people's capacity to care about strangers. Urban apathy, the dehumanizing effects of modern life. It was a story about the failure of a certain kind of person. It was a satisfying explanation, and it was wrong, because the same pattern appeared in smaller cities, in close-knit communities, in places where neighbors knew each other's names. People who would have described themselves as caring and involved. The geography changed. The outcome did not, which meant it was not about New York. It was about something else entirely. The problem was not who these people were. The problem was the conditions they were in. The same conditions that would produce the same behavior in most people, including people who read that headline and felt a clean sense of moral superiority, including you. It is worth noting that later research did question some of the original details of the Genovese case. The number 38 was disputed. The visibility some neighbors had of the attack may have been less than reported. The original account overstated certain elements. What was not disputed was the mechanism the case brought into focus. That held up. In laboratories, in field studies, with participants who had no connection to New York or to 1964. Across decades, 2 social psychologists at Columbia University decided to build experiments around exactly this question. What is it about groups that changes how individuals respond when something goes wrong? Latané and Darley, beginning in 1968, for years after Genovese. They were not trying to explain Genovese. They were trying to explain the behavior, the mechanism underneath. In one of the most replicated experiments in social psychology, participants were placed in separate cubicles. They were told they would be having a group conversation over an intercom system. The number of other participants they believed were in the conversation was varied. Midway through, one voice, an actor, a Confederate, began having what sounded like a seizure. The symptoms escalated. The voice became urgent, then fragmented, then went silent. When participants believed they were the only one on the line, 85% got up and went for help immediately. When they believed 5 other people were also listening, only 31% intervened. And those who did take action took significantly longer to move. Same emergency, same voice, same distress. The only variable was how many people the participant believed were also hearing it. That single variable cut the intervention rate by more than half and extended the time it took those who did act to actually move. Think about that. The only thing that changed was the number, and it cut the response rate by more than half. Latané and Darley called this the bystander effect, and it replicated, not once, across different types of emergencies, different group sizes, different settings, different countries. The direction was always the same. More witnesses, less action. Subscribe. This channel is built for exactly the kind of thinking you are doing right now. Now, why? What is actually happening inside a person in those moments? Latané and Darley identified 2 processes that operate simultaneously. Neither requires indifference. Neither requires bad intent. They are automatic. The first is diffusion of responsibility. When you are alone and something happens, the entire weight of responding sits with you. There is no ambiguity about whose problem it is. When there are 20 people present, your felt share drops to something closer to 1/20th. And 1/20th is easy to defer. The cost of waiting 1 more second feels negligible. Then the next second, then another. The responsibility has not disappeared. It has spread so thin across the group that no individual can feel it clearly enough to act. No one is ignoring it deliberately. Everyone is waiting for the person whose job it clearly is. That person does not exist. You are not choosing to abandon someone. The arithmetic of the group is quietly removing the urgency of choice. The second process is evaluation apprehension. It is a longer phrase for a very fast thing. Before acting in a public situation, you scan the group. You look for cues about what is happening, what is appropriate, what level of alarm the situation actually warrants. You do this automatically, faster than deliberate thought. If the people around you appear calm, you draw one of 2 conclusions. Either you are misreading the situation, or someone more qualified, more informed, more positioned than you is already handling it. Both conclusions land in the same place. You wait, and while you wait, you watch the others. Their waiting looks like calm. Their calm confirms your reading. The group generates its own justification for staying still. The group becomes its own evidence. A completely false signal about the situation, generated by the group, and used by every member to justify staying still. And the cruel irony is that everyone in the group is running the same calculation at the same time. Each person scanning the others. Each person seeing apparent calm. Each person concluding they are the one who is probably overreacting. Nobody is overreacting. Nobody knows that. The group has created a reality that none of its members intended, and everyone inside it is using that reality as a guide. Which brings us to the second concept, and this one is stranger. In 1993, Deborah Prentice and Dale Miller at Princeton University documented something they called pluralistic ignorance. In ambiguous social situations, people use each other's behavior as evidence about what is normal and appropriate. That part we already established through the bystander effect. But Prentice and Miller found something additional. Because everyone is privately uncertain while publicly appearing calm, a false consensus forms. Each person concludes that everyone else is comfortable with how things are, when in reality, nobody is. They first documented this in campus drinking culture at an Ivy League university. Students privately felt the level of drinking was excessive and uncomfortable. But when they looked around, they saw people who appeared at ease. So each student assumed they were the outlier. They said nothing. They conformed. By conforming, they became the evidence that every other uncomfortable person used to justify their own silence. The norm was maintained by the very people who opposed it. None of them knew that everyone else felt the same way. The group was sustaining a shared fiction, held in place not by agreement, but by each member's assumption that the others agreed. 2 mechanisms, 1 outcome. A group that cannot act because every individual inside it is waiting on the group. If you want to keep thinking about this, the description has more to follow. Now think about where you have seen both of these at work. The group chat where someone sends an urgent message and 40 people see it and none of them respond. The read receipts stack up one by one. Not because 40 people decided to ignore it, because each person assumed one of the other 39 would handle it. The diffusion of responsibility distributed the accountability so thinly across the group that it effectively vanished. No one person felt it clearly enough to act. The message is still there. The need is still there. The accountability simply has nowhere to land. The comment section where something harmful is being said, thousands of people scroll past it. Not because thousands of people are fine with it. Because each person, seeing no pushback, concludes that either they are overreacting or someone better equipped will step in. Pluralistic ignorance and diffusion of responsibility. Operating together, reinforcing each other. The meeting where a proposal goes through that no one in the room actually supports. The silence feels like consensus. Each person interprets the absence of objection as agreement. Each person stays quiet because the others are quiet. Everyone walks out, and each person privately assumes they were the only one with doubts. These are not failures of courage. They are the predictable result of two documented mechanisms activating automatically under group conditions. You have been in these situations. You will be in them again. The question is not whether, it is when, and what you do with the next one. The same mechanisms that operated in Kew Gardens in 1964. The names have changed. The technology has changed. The mechanisms have not. Now here is what most people hope to hear next. That learning about this makes you immune to it. That is not what the research shows. Participants explicitly taught about the bystander effect and then placed in a simulated emergency still exhibited the effect, at rates nearly identical to people who had never heard of it. The knowledge is stored in one part of the brain. The automatic social processing happens in another, and the automatic part activates first. But two things do shift the outcome, both from the same research, not from optimism. The first is naming in the moment. When you recognize that you are in a group situation and feel the pull toward an action. The act of naming what is happening, even internally, even silently, disrupts the automatic processing enough to create a pause. Not a solution, a pause. In that pause, deliberate choice becomes possible in a way it was not a moment before. That is not nothing. In a mechanism that operates in seconds, a pause is significant. The second is specificity. The bystander effect weakens considerably when responsibility is assigned to one named individual rather than diffused across a group. A direct address, "You, in the gray coat, please call for help," produces a level of felt accountability that a general appeal to a crowd never reaches. It collapses the diffusion. It removes the ambiguity about whose problem this is. The crowd is not the unit. The person inside the crowd is. This is why the vocabulary matters. Not for its own sake, because naming what is happening changes what is available to you in the moment that follows. The more people who see it, the less likely anyone is to do anything. That is not a theory. That is what the data shows. And you have just spent 14 minutes inside a group of people watching the same video, without acting. And right now, you are one of those people. You watch this in a world where millions of other people have access to the same information, where the same mechanisms are running in every group conversation, every comment section, every meeting room, every moment that ends in silence when it should not. And most of those people, in the next situation that calls for it, will wait, will scan the room, will conclude that someone else has it covered. Most of them will not name it when it happens, not because they lack the capacity, because naming requires noticing first. And noticing requires having been told what to look for. The bystander effect is not obvious when you are inside it. It feels like waiting. It feels like caution. It feels like reading the room correctly. It does not feel like a well-documented failure of collective action. But that is what it is. You have been told. What you do with that is the part that belongs to you. The question is not whether the bystander effect will appear in your life again. It will, probably this week, in a situation that feels far smaller than a street attack in Queens. A message that goes unanswered. A comment that goes unchallenged. A room that stays quiet. A moment where you feel the pull of the group and you wait, and then the moment passes. The question is whether, the next time the conditions are in place, you will notice, before the group settles into its silence and pulls you with it. Whether the name you now have will arrive fast enough to create the pause that makes a different choice possible. You now have a name for what that silence is. That is the beginning of something.